Uh-oh. Donald, you thought that you were really going to bring down Canada and make Canada the 51st state. Seriously, you're losing the economic war right now to Canada that you unleashed. Canadians have been absolutely furious this entire year at Donald Trump and his regime, and Canada has fought back. Canada is winning the economic war and trade war against the United States. They are targeting specific sectors like the bourbon industry, like the wine industry and others, and making industries that have typically given more money to Trump and Republicans and making them pay. So, let's take account of the economic war that Donald Trump unleashed against Canada and how the people of Canada stood together, stood strong, stood tough, and fought back against the Trump regime going elbows up. The leader of Midas Canada, Charlie Angus, said we should reflect on how Canada has stood up to the bully and struck back. Here's what Charlie Angus, who leads Midas Canada. By the way, make sure everyone subscribe to Midas Canada. Here's what he's got to say. Here, play this clip. This is the end of year 1 of the economic war with the United States. We don't know where it goes in year 2. It's going to probably get more serious. But it's important at the end of year 1 to look at the victories, the costs, and where we stand, because we're standing pretty okay right now. And in any war, there's certain battles, certain victories, certain defeats that become incredibly symbolic. And nothing is more symbolic than the torching of the American bourbon economy. That's your fault, Donald Trump. And we're going to get into the extent of the disaster that you have brought upon your own people. And then Charlie Angus is telling me about how the bourbon industry in the United States, how Jim Beam shutting down factories, how Canada, the Canadian people have been able to fight back.
Let's show you more of what Charlie Angus told me earlier. Let's play this clip. They have a much less happy Christmas story to tell right now in Kentucky with the news that the main Jim Beam distillery is shutting down for 2026. This is significant. This has been in operation, I think, since 1935. There are 1,500 UFCW unionized jobs on the line. And we are sorry to see good union jobs being lost. But this is what happens in a war. And right now, the Canadian war that was supposed to break us, we're taking that war to key symbols of the American identity. And there's nothing more symbolic on the world stage than Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, that whole Kentucky bourbon culture. Well, it's in free fall right now. So, let's just compare it where we are 1 year in this war where Donald Trump on Christmas Day launched this ugly attack on Greenland, Panama, Canada, said he was going to take us over, told us all to go to hell. You didn't hear Mitch McConnell, Senate leader from Kentucky, say, geez, that's really unacceptable behavior, Donald. No, you didn't hear anybody in the Washington establishment speak out as he threatened our nation, and Canadians responded accordingly with the largest boycott in memory. So where are we? Because everyone said that Canada would fold. We would cave in. Donald would push us around. Well, right now we for 54,000 new jobs last month. That's the 3rd consecutive increase in jobs. We see a 16th month low in unemployment. And they're saying now and in the banking system that the last time we saw a 6-tick drop in unemployment was during the tech boom of 1999. Boo. Welcome to Canada. Meanwhile, in the United States, increasing insecurity about jobs and the affordability crisis, which Donald Trump says is a hoax. It's not a hoax. It's a stupid trade war where he's alienated people from around the world. A Governor Andy Beshear from Kentucky has said that he's been deeply disappointed by Donald Trump's falsehoods on the affordability issue. He said it's a slap in the face to the people, to our people. I want Kentuckians and Americans to know that I am listening to them. I am surprised but not shocked that Donald Trump still doesn't get it. Well, let's get down to the impacts of the Canadian boycott on the Jim Beam and larger Kentucky industry. It's a $9 billion industry in that state. Jim Beam is shutting its main plant down for the year. Now, they've come up with some great excuses. They said they're going to close it for site enhancements. They say there's a glut of whiskey on the market. A glut really, given the fact that they produced this year 140 million proof gallons of whiskey, which is 55 million gallons less than last year. So they made 55 million gallons less, and it's still a glut in the market. Then they said there was a change in the youth market. Certainly the Kentucky newspapers understand. They've been saying talk to Canada about why this market has disintegrated. The fact is that the US has lost 85% of their market this year in terms of export, and that's because of Canada. Now, it's important to know in terms of like what bourbon does in terms of being a reliable product, because it's used in many restaurants and bars and making all kinds of mixed drinks. People just rely on bourbon. Once you stop using bourbon and you find alternatives, you get used to using the alternatives. So, That market may not come back even when this thing is over, or it will come back in a much smaller form. I've talked to many people in the restaurant business in Canada who have now been exploring Canadian whiskies, Irish whiskies, and choosing alternatives to what they normally would, have just gotten Jim Beam out and they're finding their customers like it better, and their customers certainly like to know what's in that glass cooze. They're not buying it if it's Jim Beam. So, Jim Beam shut down. Jack Daniels has had layoffs, saying in August it was a 65% drop in sales to Canada that was affecting them. Now of course we know that that's gotten much worse in terms of an overall 85% drop. Kentucky Out Bourbon went bankrupt in October, and this is quite the story. The bourbon company tried to put their barrels of whiskey up to help pay down their debts, and this was rejected by the courts. Judge Everett said that after getting testimony from market experts in the whiskey trade, it quote really brought home to the court the dismal state of the barrel market. Among the insights Judge Everett found was it would be quote very challenging to sell this inventory without a considerable discount. That's a destroyed market. Way to go, Donald. Now, the other issue here is on the collusion and the complicity of the American political class that want to convict a predator, a con man, a man who basically existed in business because he was receiving so much money through Russian shell companies and dark money from the Russian mob. Did you really think this guy was going to put the American people first? He's bragging now that he's going to give himself a $1 billion gift from the taxpayers because he was investigated by the FBI in Mar-a-Lago. He's not only trying to shake down Canada, he's shaking down the American people. But if we look at Suntory Holdings, which is the company that has Jim Beam Global, Spirits and Wine, and Maker's Mark Distillery, Suntory Holdings decided in 2020 where they were going to put their investments in terms of the election race. In the Senate, supporting Republicans. In the House, supporting Republicans. Well, as my old father would say, you get what you paid for. Don't you? You paid for Trump, you paid for Republicans, and now your market is in free fall. And let's just look at where we were, say, 10 years ago. There was such a boom in terms of American whiskeys in the export market. So much effort was going into building a brand in a market that they were saying there was no end in sight to the growth. Well, the growth is gone. It's finished. That's what happens when you push people around. You know, folks. It's like in high school. You know, the guy who would come up to you in school and push you around and throw you into the locker and threaten you, and then, when he had his birthday party and nobody went and he was all upset. Well, how do you think that you're going to create trade by threatening people? You know, Donald Trump is demanding now as part of the next negotiations with the CAUSMA that he's demanding that we restore American booze on the shelves. Well, yeah, you think you can push the Canadian government around? The provincial governments? Who knows? You can't push Canadian citizens around. Canadians aren't buying it. That's the power of the boycott. Greater than. Well, there you have it. Canada's standing strong. Canada going elbows up. And as we reflect on everything at the end of this year, I'm proud that we launched Midas Canada here. Proud of my friendship with Charlie Angus and proud of the Canadian support that we have. And it's been an honor to do anything I can to shed additional attention and to provide a spotlight on what an incredible country Canada is. How incredible the Canadian people are.
Truly, one of my highlights personally, professionally, one of my life highlights has been the friendships I've made with all of our Canadian supporters here at the Midas Touch Network and building out Midas Canada, and shout out to all the other Midas Mighty internationally in Europe, in Australia, in Africa, in Central America, South America, Mexico, in Asia. So, shout out to y'all. But I wanted to do this video right here for all the Midas Mighty in Canada. The Midas Mighty there, everybody. Thanks for watching.